Hi everybody, my name is Alan. On behalf of the crew of the show, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Bridging Heaven and Earth. You know, since we did the last show, I've had the opportunity, we've been working on these few projects. One has been to put all the shows, this is the 143rd show we've done. We've been doing it for about 7 or 8 years now. And to put all the shows on the DVD format, so to take all the shows that are on different formats of tapes, the masters, and put them on DVD so we can have all the shows archived in one place in a small box and all that. And then another thing we've been doing is making like audio files, wave files they're called, of all the shows to send and to collaborate with this internet radio station called Success Talk, so that all the shows are available, the audio portions of all the shows are available on the internet, so that anyone all over the world with an internet hookup can go and for free, at least at this point, can go to this Success Talk radio station on the internet and listen to any of the shows. I think 141 at this point of the bridging shows are on. The last few in this one haven't been put on yet, but they will be probably by the time you watch this. And the thing that has been striking me is that I've had a chance to listen to a lot of the shows and a lot of the interviews and a lot of the just the incredible music and see some of the art as it's been playing and as we've been reproducing it in both those formats, you know, on the DVD and for the audio format. And the thing that strikes me is that the similarity, in a way, of all the messages. Now, we've had probably over 300 guests by now, and doing extraordinarily different things in terms of music, in terms of art, in terms of healing, channeling, writing books, making music. And yet the root of all the shows from the very beginning is the same. And it's the same, is to connect to that love that we all are. And the synchronicity of all the messages and how they all fit together and how they all, in a way, lead to that root, lead to that hub of the wheel. And although they all look like different spokes on the wheel, and if you separate them out, they could look different from the other, but the essence of all of them is the same, is that return to love, is to heal the heart, is to get us to recognize the part of ourselves that is God, that is truth, that is that recognition of that knowing. And we here feel so honored to be able to participate with you in doing that and to collaborate with all these extraordinary people who come in from all over and make tremendous effort to get here to share their connection, their love, their gifts, their story with you, the audience, with you, the people who tune into Bridging Heaven and Earth and share so much of your love and collaborative efforts with us. And again tonight we have somebody whose gifts are unbelievable, whose humbleness is extraordinary, and who's come to share that story and that gift and that understanding and that return to love, that healing of the heart with you. Egidio is a world-renowned healer for the extraordinary healing work he did in Russia, in particularly around Chernobyl, which was the site of, everybody probably knows, a nuclear disaster. He received the Russia's most prestigious Cosmonaut Award, which has only been given twice in the last 100 years. One was to Egidio, and one was to the French President Mitterrand. They were so taken with the healing that he did of the physical form and of the heart that that award was given in a way that just says how much that healing and that love took effect in Russia. And he's also the author of an extraordinary book, Whose Hands Are These?, that tells his story. And it's a compelling story, and not an easy story. A story of trials and tribulations, of how this earth somehow can take away those gifts in a way, prevent us from knowing those gifts, those healing powers, that connection, because we're not used to it. And what trials and tribulations he had to go through to regain that, and to rededicate his life, or to dedicate his life, because he was young when he actually lost them, to healing. And that's what he does. He just goes around the world to heal. And we also have two videos, one that has never been shown before on bridging, a sacred visionary art video that's just very, very beautiful and very powerful. And then we've gotten a lot of requests for that Enough God video that Lessia wrote and performed, and is on the Lessia Bridging Heaven and Earth CD. So again, this show is an opportunity for us to know that, to experience that. So settle in, relax. If you know how to meditate, please join me in a short meditation, and then we'll have a video, and then Jean will be with us. So please join me. Thank you. So we're going to begin tonight's show with that video I described a little earlier, Sacred Visionary Art. It was prepared and given to us with love by David and the Global Peace Foundation. It's a beautiful video, so just settle in, and we get back to this set, Jean will be with us. Hi, welcome. So we're on the set with Gene. Welcome, Gene.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Alan, I'd like to say you were 100% right. Love is the foundation.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, in reading your story, it was really compelling, as I said at the open, about how, I mean, why don't you tell the story how you were a little child and these gifts were there for you, and then you were put in a sanitarium, just horrible things.
Well, basically, this is something that I received. I never cracked a book to read about it. And at 5 years old, I used to climb up the stairs on all fours, and there was this old Italian man. They would peel an apple without breaking the skin, and I would just watch him. The good news is we ate the apple after, and one day he was doing that, and boom, he cut his thumb, and his thumb was just hanging there, and as children are, without thinking, I just grabbed his thumb. Then I learned a couple of new words in Italian, and he shook me loose. It was a red ring around his thumb. No bleeding, no nothing, no cut. So he dragged me downstairs.
And how old were you then?
I was about 5 years old, 6.
Wow. And so, I mean, you didn't have any theory about it. You just reached out and something happened.
That happened, right. And he dragged me downstairs to my parents' apartment, and he started telling my parents what happened. And they said, yeah, Joseph, you had too much wine today, you know?
Right.
So make a long story short, I
what
would...
What have you been doing with those apples?
Right, yeah. And I would look at somebody and say, oh, that's a beautiful color they have around them. And my parents would, you know, take a step back, and then I would say, it's all kinds of colors. And the phone would ring, and I'd say, oh, that's Aunt Mary. She's going to tell us about what happened. And it was Aunt Mary, and so forth and so on. And a relative would come over the house and sit on the couch, and, you know, little children, I put my head on their lap, and she got up, she says, I have no more arthritis pains.
Wow.
It's, you know, it's gone. And I kept talking about the colors, and I ended up being taken to the parish priest.
Good luck.
Yeah. So he started listening to what was going on, and he says, he's got the devil.
It's the devil's work.
The devil's work. So he needs an exorcism. So I had 2. As you could see, it didn't do any good, but anyway, I had 2. And then it went on and on and on.
Did you, like, even at this age, did you start to, like, hold it back and not say? Because you obviously saw weird things were starting to happen when you were just being yourself?
Sometimes, but most of the times it just flew out of me, just flowed.
Because you didn't really have a regulator then?
No, none whatsoever.
It
just flew out.
Wow.
And I would say, geez, I love the colors around that lady. Look at the purple and this and that. I ended up getting to a psychiatrist.
So you went from your parents to the parish priest and exorcisms, and then to a psychiatrist.
And he says he's in
I don't
trouble.
I don't know, up or down. That's just it's quite a light up.
And this is, we're 8 years old. And he says he's in trouble, he needs help. So I got committed, and I got shock treatments at least twice a week, wet sheet treatments. And it was like starting your life all over again.
You remember that?
I remember.
Really?
Really.
And there's almost, you can't imagine it, right?
No, there's no way I can verbally tell you about it.
I mean, it's so barbaric, it's so weird.
Yeah, right now the hair on my arm is standing up just talking about it.
I'll tell you the truth, mine too.
So anyway, I ended up in there for about a year.
And twice a week you were getting shot, where they, like in Snake Pit, like in the movies.
Exactly. And you get wrapped in these cold sheets, and there was no way you could hold your body fluids or anything like that.
I'm getting dizzy just listening.
So anyway, what transpired was I learned then, and as I say, each time I had these treatments, it was like, who am I? Where did I come from?
So it just fried you?
Just fried me up. And I had to be toilet trained when I went home.
At 8?
8, 9 years old then. And what happened was that I learned I don't see no colors, I don't see nothing anymore.
And you didn't?
No, I didn't.
Now, whether you still could have, or your brain had been fried, or just that you just repressed it because you knew bad things are going to happen when you see this shit.
Totally. So I got home, and I went through a period where I just recovered from all that.
I would say.
And then 14 years old, I went to camp. Those days, big deal. You're going to
Yeah,
camp.
I went to camp,
Go
too.
from New York to New Jersey, camp out in the
out in
big
the
wilderness. You
Yeah,
know?
I know.
Yeah.
Before I went there, I used to think tomatoes grew on the Safeway shelves. Oh my God, there's trees.
Yeah.
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh,
so, yeah,
that's it.
Right.
And I went to camp, and all of a sudden I had a pain in my side. And I told the counselor, he said, don't worry about it, you're all right, you know, eat your food. And I fell on the floor with the pain, ended up with appendicitis. And I died on the operating table. And I guess they didn't want me, they sent me back again.
Yeah, right,
So,
they took one look. No.
Out.
You're with the slugs down there.
So then about 2 weeks later, I got peritonitis, and blood system got totally poisoned, and I passed over again. And I got thrown out again, too, you know.
That's amazing.
So anyway, after that, I recuperated and went home, and I started my life all over again. And I ended up going into the Korean War, joined the Navy, lied about my age a little, and came home, married the girl down the street, had 3 wonderful, beautiful children. Today, I'm a grandfather of 10 kids,
Wow.
10 grandchildren.
Wow.
And what happened was, I got to get out of New York. I have to go to California, because no matter what I did, and I've had many occupations.
And you came to a career, you were an electrical contractor.
Right.
And you had a wife, and I thought it was 4 kids.
4 kids.
Oh, 4.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was 3. Yeah.
No, I must have forgot about one.
Yeah,
But
no,
anyway.
oh my God, this show is like a shock to
Yeah.
you. Lost a kid here.
Lost a kid. But anyway, I ended up out in California, and I'm almost a native because I came out here in the spirit of '76. And you don't belong here. I just kept having this feeling, no matter what I did and where I did it, you just didn't belong there.
In California or in New York?
In New York, wherever,
right.
you know. And then all of a sudden my life just went kaput. To give you an idea, on a Monday, my divorce became final. On a Tuesday, my partner ran away with all the money. On a Wednesday, I was in a head-on collision. On a Thursday, I couldn't pay for some thing I was owning, so they took that away from me. On a Friday, the general contractor stole all my equipment and material. I made no plans.
That's not a good week.
No, I made no plans for the weekend. None whatsoever.
No, this is a weekend you stay low to the ground.
Right, exactly.
Oh my God.
So this went on for about 3 months.
Really?
I ended up, I couldn't get a job at McDonald's.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah.
You were overqualified. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, you're too old, you're too young, you're overqualified,
right,
you're
exactly.
underqualified.
And all of a sudden that morning, I got a phone call from a lady who I knew her and her husband say hi to, you know, that was the gist of it. And she says, Gene, I had a dream about you last night. I said, honey, that's what I need is a good dream, you know? Right. And she says,
from a married woman, this is not going to end well.
Yeah. So she says to me, she says, I dreamt that you healed me. I said, what? She
and
says,
so you didn't even remember that what went on just wiped out.
Wiped out completely.
All right, go ahead.
So I says, what do you mean I healed you? She says, well, can I come over to your house and talk to you about it? I said, sure, that's all right. I'm ready to hang the phone up. I said, what did I heal you from? She says, I have herpes. I said, oh, that's what's coming in the front door next, you know?
Very contagious.
Right,
very
exactly.
Right.
So before I had the good sense to lock the front door, there was a knock on the door. And I opened the door, and she was a beautiful lady. She was long black hair. The only problem was she was covered from head to toe with these blisters, these herpes blisters. And the compassion I felt at that moment, I still feel today. So I said, come on in the house. And I took her into the kitchen. I pulled out the kitchen chair because I was going to sit on the other side of the kitchen table.
Right, you didn't want to get too close. I mean, right.
I ended up sitting as close as you and I are. Mm-hmm. And she started to cry, and I said, what's wrong? She says, this is where I was sitting in my dream.
Wow.
I figured she was, you know,
Yeah, smoking and
smoking
drinking
and whatever she was doing, right? You know,
some mind-altering experience.
I needed
So, I
something.
mean, at this point, you didn't have like any spiritual background, nothing. It was just
Nothing,
like, I lost my
nothing.
job, I lost my wife.
Yeah,
God knows
everything.
what my kids are doing. I got in an accident, everybody stole my equipment. This sucks.
Limbo.
Right, right. I mean, you look back now and it was like you needed that.
I needed to get to that point.
Right, to just such a traumatic thing. Right?
Yeah, so she said to me, she said, yeah, this is where I was in my dream. I said, well, tell me about your dream. She says, well, everything you've said, everything you've done, other than putting your hand on my shoulder. And with that, she picked up my hand on the shoulder, and I looked at her, and she goes, boop. And I says, are you all right? No response. I says, are you okay? I felt silly as heck sitting there when this lady, you know, my hand, she's sleeping.
She went
man.
out.
She went out.
Right.
So I says, because I'm very analytical, you know.
If I go out, are you going to be able to do the whole show yourself? Let me give you a
got the cue
really
cards.
good questions.
You got the
coming
cue
up.
cards.
Yeah, we got a top-notch staff, so you'll be probably
I'll be
okay.
all right,
all right.
yeah. So what happened was, I says, well, I got to take my hand off her shoulder.
Right.
And I went to remove my hand, and I pulled her halfway off the seat.
You couldn't, like you were connected.
It was attached,
Right.
glued or fixed. I'm still looking for the answer for that one. I picked her up, put her back on the chair. And I says, there's something wrong with this picture, you know? And I says, oh, I know what happened. I went crazy. You know, I figured I had the background, right?
Right.
So I went crazy. So I just sat there and I accepted the fact that I couldn't move my hand off her. About 20 minutes go by or so, down comes the hand,
And
up
up
comes
comes
her
the
head. And I says, are you okay? She says, yeah, I feel so good.
But the blisters were still there at that
Oh,
point.
totally there.
Okay.
So I says, that's good. You know, what was I going to say? You know,
Right, I'm glad you woke up. I mean,
yeah,
your
yeah.
husband would
Right.
come in an hour and I'd be screwed just
Yeah,
sleeping
right.
on my chair here.
So anyway, she gets up and a couple of words here and there, and out the door she goes. And I says, boy, what a way to start a day, you know? And
I knew this week was trouble.
And about 5 minutes go by, and there's a knock at the door. And I says, here they come to get me. You know, the guys that tied a jacket in the front.
Right, finally, the
Yeah.
white, the guy.
Yeah, that's what I figured, you
Oh,
know.
my
So I opened the door, and who was it but the guy from the water company turned the water off. I couldn't pay my water bill. So he was nice enough to let me fill the tub up, you know.
Right.
So about an hour later, another knock on the door. And I figured they came back, you know.
Right.
Opened the door, it was the guy from the electric company to turn off the lights because I couldn't pay the electric bill, right?
Wow.
So after that, I says, boy, this is crazy. So I finished the day, and the night came along, and 6:30, 7 o'clock that morning, the phone rang, which was the only thing working in the house. And who was it but this lady that was there the day before? I had my hand on her shoulder. And she was going into outer space, screaming, yelling, this and that. And I said, "Oi, what is she going to say I did to her, right?"
Oh, my God. I don't have any money, so a lawsuit doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, right? So what happened was she says, "Gene, I got to tell you." And I says, "What? What?" And I'm like hanging on the chair. I says, "Slow down, take a nice deep breath and tell me." And she goes, "Gene, there isn't a mark on my body."
Wow. This is overnight.
Overnight. And I says, "Go see your doctor right away," like he or she could do something about it, right? That's the only thing I could think of, right? Because I thought maybe she was smoking a little pot or something, you know?
Right.
So I says, "Then come back and see me." So she's okay. So the morning went by, and most of it went out of my head, you know, and
You had bigger
Yeah,
fish to fry
right.
in the dark without water.
water, no electricity.
Right.
So knock at the door, I opened the door, and there she was. Not a mark on her body.
Clean.
I
Wow.
mean, as clean as your jacket, your pants. I mean, the old ticker started really going at
Right.
that time. And today, I know I had to see that with my own eyes
Right.
to be where I am today,
Right.
you know. So she said a couple of words, and out she went. And I went into my living room and, you know, tried to catch my breath. And I sat in my favorite chair, and I I don't want to say I went to sleep, but I went into a state. And I can account for being there for 3 days without getting out of that chair for nothing whatsoever. When I finally woke up, I looked around, and this was in Escondido, California. I looked around, I looked out the window, and I had a beautiful avocado tree there. And I could feel the roots literally going into the ground. I could feel the veins going into the leaves. I could feel the breeze without a wind. And I still have that feeling today. I reached over, got my car keys, walked out of the house. I left the clothes there, the shoes, the house I left there. Didn't belong to me anymore. It was like I had to just start all over again. Got in my car and went down to my sister's house, and I said, I need some place to sleep. And thank God for sisters, you know, and she says, you could stay here as long as you want. And what happened was, foolishly, I tried to get my business back together again, and kaput.
Yeah, it wasn't what you were supposed to be doing anymore.
So I was out at a party with this lady. We were having a great time, you know, good time. She looks at me, she says, Gene, take me home right away. I've got such a headache. My eyes are crossing. So I put my hand on her head. What did you do? She said. I says, nothing, you know. Scared the heck out of me.
Oh, so in other words, you weren't connecting the dots yet?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
So she says, it just went away like that. I says, that's nice, you know. What was I going to say?
Wow.
Guy over there says, Gene, hey, my back. Another guy over there, my shoulder, could you help me with my shoulder? I had a line of people standing there.
You probably would tonight if the crew in the audience would. So after the show, if you the secondary line.
So anyway, what happened was
that everyone, you were just healing like this line of people.
Just line of people.
Just by putting your hand wherever they're,
right.
And then
sometimes not even touching them. Just, you know, because I've been to the Soviet Union 14, 15 times, and I work on an average of 2,500 people a day there. And that's, you know, not even touching them, so to speak.
Wow.
So this is how it all started again.
Wow. And you still had no remembrance of the childhood. When did that come back?
That came back when somebody said to me, Gene, you ought to write a book. And that's when I wrote Whose Hands Are These? And the flood just came into me.
Really?
Just
like that?
Just like that.
And you remembered the whole thing with the exorcisms, the shock treatments,
everything,
which you hadn't had any recollection,
no idea whatsoever,
till that moment.
Not an inkling of it. Yeah.
Wow!
And everything just started flowing back into me. So after that, the word got out: invite Gene to the party. He plays this game with energy. You know, I went to a lot of parties.
You were popular all of a sudden.
All of a sudden, like that, yeah.
As a fallen electrical contractor, he would get invited to as a healer.
Yeah. Well, you don't know how many people come into my centers now and say, "You're the healer?
Right.
You look look like my garbage man, or my truck driver, or my cleaner."
There are a
guy.
lot of concepts about this. We were talking before about robes.
Oh yes.
I mean, you should you should have white robes. That's how you can tell a healer or something, or a spiritual person.
Well, I've got a T-shirt with wings on the back of it.
We can put that for the second half. All right, so now what we'll do, I think we'll take a break now and show that video that people request, and then we'll come back and talk, you know, with Gene about how, once he got started on this, how it progressed and how he's been all over the world, and just the whole healing process and the healing the heart process. So we're going to show the video. It's Enough God. It's by Lessia. It's written and performed by Lessia, and it's from the Lessia Bridging Heaven and Earth CD. So, I mean, listen to the words. I mean, you would think there's enough God and there's enough love to go around. So.
Teach him how to hate. Don't ask why, just do it. teach him how to kiss. Well, there's nothing to it. They teach him how to load and fire for their holy land. They take a little boy and make him an angry man. But isn't there enough God to go around? Aren't there enough soldiers underground? Isn't there a bit of peace to be found? Isn't there enough God to go around? And on the other side sits a mother crying. The son is back, but not for long, 'cause he lies dying. Another faceless boy shot down for their holy land. Though she prays for him, she can't really understand. She says, isn't there enough God to go around? Aren't there enough soldiers underground? Isn't there a bit of peace to be found? Isn't there enough God to go around? People, they close their eyes, they don't see what they're doing. 'Cause they'll trade anything for the dreams that they're pursuing. They burn, they bomb, they bargain for their holy lands. But nobody wins that way, nobody ever can. Tell me, isn't there enough God to go around? Aren't there enough soldiers underground? Isn't there a bit of peace to be found? Isn't there enough God to go around? Isn't there enough God to go around? Aren't there enough soldiers underground? Isn't there a bit of peace to be found? Isn't there enough God to go around? Isn't there enough God? Isn't there enough God? Isn't there enough God to go around? To go around? To go around? To go around?
Hi, we're back on the set with Gene. Why don't you talk a little about like how the healing process works, you know? So, yeah, let's just do that and then, yeah.
Okay, basically, it's a private thing that happens with each person. You know, each person accepts the energy differently. You know, I've had people, I do a lot of absentee healing. In other words,
Like remote healing.
yeah, I'll have people in the audience say, you know, give me a name. And as soon as the name is, I hear the name, it's done like that.
Okay, now what is the process? Like, how does that work? I mean, do you visualize it? Do you experience it? Is it like seeing the roots of the tree?
No, it's basically a knowing that it's going to
knowing.
happen. I don't need any physical aspect to it. Give you a case in point. I was in a part of California here in Beverly Hills, and I had about 50 people. And one guy in the back of the room raises his hand and gives me a name. And about maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, he calls me up, and I know the guy. He's a pretty famous author without giving out his name. And he says, Gene, he says, you know, I gave you my mother's name. And I called her up because I looked at my watch, what time I did that. And I called her up, and she said, I don't know what you're doing, but keep it up. She said, I'm out of a sick bed of 7 years, and I don't need my medication anymore. And I says, geez, I'm so happy for you and your mother. And he says, Gene, but what you don't understand, she lives in England. So energy has no barriers.
There's no time and
no
space.
barriers. Like this other fella, I do phone healings, and this fella calls me up and he's got a hernia. So I worked with him actually in Chicago. He was in Chicago, I was in California. And we're talking, and he says, geez, I feel okay now, you know, and we hang up and I go to the next person. And about, 4 or 5 weeks later, I get a letter and he says, I'm the fellow from Chicago and with the hernia. Would you please call me? I have something very important to tell you. And I says, okay, I'm gonna. I had such a feeling to call this guy. So I called him and he says, let me tell you what happened that day. He says, I felt great. He says, my wife was scheduled to go get a cataract operation. So I piled her in the car and took her to the hospital, and I'm waiting in the waiting room, and out comes the doctor like a wet hen. He says, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with her. Why did you bring her to the hospital? Because you told me. That's why I brought her to the hospital. Yeah. So
you scheduled it.
So he goes into the room where she was, and she's getting her things together, and he says, honey, what's going on? So she puts her head down. She says, do you remember when you had your phone healing? He says, yeah. She says, I was on extension.
Really?
So who knows, right?
Wow.
I wish I could say, you know, in 10 minutes, everybody's going to be fine. But I can't do that, you know. But there's so many stories. The one story was I was in a train from Moscow to Leningrad, and as a sleeper, because it takes so many hours to get there. And there was 3 of us, myself, a traveling companion, and my translator. And all of a sudden, this big Russian robust guy is standing in the doorway, pointing up, saying, that's my bed in Russian. So my translator told me, oh, this is the Soviet Union, we share things, you know, don't worry, we don't disrobe. So I said, well, come on in. And I looked at him, he's clean shaven, not a mark on his face. And I said, there's something wrong with his left side of his face. So he said to me, he said to my translator, how does he know there's something wrong with my face? And she told him what I do. And he opened his mouth. He had a gaping hole in the jawline. He had cancer and radiation poisoning from Chernobyl. So I asked if I could work with him. And he gets up on his bunk, and I'm standing on the 2 bottom bunks trying to hold my equilibrium like a karate match to keep my hand in there. In about 15 minutes, I come down and I go to sleep. In about 3 or 4 hours, I hear this crying. So I look around, lady's sleeping. I look up, my translator's crying. I look up at the other guy, he's sitting there cross-legged. Tears are just flowing out of him. And I says, what's going on? And she says, he just told me a story that touched my heart. He woke up in a start, and he realized he had no more pain in his face. And he went to put his tongue in the hole, wasn't there.
So like overnight, this hole that had been there closed up and healed.
Couple of hours.
A couple hours.
Yeah. So she says, you know, I was so touched when he told me that, but then when he said something to me, it really got me crying. I says, what was that? He said, you're gonna have to excuse me, I get a little emotional with this. He says, I've been a communist for 47 years. And he says, today is the first day I know there's a God.
Wow.
And, you know, it was amazing what they did for the people in the car, myself, and the trip.
Wow.
And that afternoon, I was doing these mass healings, and I walked over to this, well, we put about 100 people in a circle.
And these are people who had the radiation problem from Chernobyl.
Right.
Yeah.
They had everything.
Right.
And then I'd have about 25 chairs, and people that couldn't stand would sit in the chairs. And I went over to this one chair, and this little girl was sitting on her mother's lap. She was such a cute thing. I went to put my hand on her head, and she grabbed my pinky, and I lurched back, and she hit the floor, And she's like looking up at me. So I said, come on, walk around with me. So she's holding on my pinky, and I'm walking around. And what happened was that we got all the way around. I got back to her mother, and her mother is crying, and my translator's behind her trying to soothe her. And I says, boy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take your daughter. You know,
She hadn't walked in 20 years.
she never walked before.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I felt a hand in my pocket. She took my last Tootsie Roll.
Wow. Now that's a problem.
That's something.
In Russia, no less, without
Yeah.
Tootsie Rolls.
Yeah.
Oh, baby, you really sacrificed
Yeah.
now. So, I mean, can some people not be healed because of karma, because
Whatever.
of just something doesn't work?
No. You know, I'd love to tell people as they come into my centers, I have one in Encinitas, one in Santa Monica. I'd love to say to them, you know, hey, hour and a half, you're going to be fine. But there's no way in God's good earth that I could do that. So, you know, I work on everybody the same as I would the next person. I had one guy come into my office. He walked real military style across the floor. Do you remember me? And he gives me a shot, you know. And I says, I'm sorry, I don't.
No, I see a lot of people.
Yeah. You sure you don't remember me? And I says, no. And he crouches down, he looks up at me. Do you remember me?
Oh.
I says, no.
He used to be all twisted
He
up.
says, I was in a wheelchair 3 months ago for 8 years.
Wow.
He says, I'm running 2 miles a day, and his wife says he's eating like a horse. And he says, I'm in great shape.
And he started out at 5'10", now he's 6'4", so it's like, holy Christ.
And he
this
only
is
has to
something.
be watered once, right?
Like,
Yeah.
This is a tree we're dealing with
yeah.
here.
So, you know, there's so many thousands and thousands of stories and letters we get every day.
And, I mean, I know the type of person you are, but, I mean, do you find yourself going in through the physical, but like really like healing the heart, healing that separation, healing the dis-ease that creates the...
Well, it works on every level. You know, I have people like in Venezuela, you know, the picture there was doing mass healings. I was being interviewed on a TV show, and the guy says, well, what do you work
can't
on?
anymore. Now you're exclusive, so you're
Yeah.
only bridging heaven.
Yeah.
That's it.
He says, well, what do you work on? I says, well, I've worked on just about everything, emotional, mental, and physical. I says, well, wait a minute, you know, leprosy. I've never worked on with leprosy. The next day,
Brings in all the
in the
lepers.
door, they come.
Wow.
That's like the one of the guy pulled up in an ambulance. His son was in a coma, and they wheel him in, and he goes, "How long do you think it's going to take?" You know. So
Because I'm paying the cab,
I said,
and he's waiting. So
He
would you
says-
hurry up?
I said, at least
thought
give
you
me
were
an
a
hour,
healer.
you know, give me an hour or so, you know. But anyway, make a long story short, next day you come out of the coma. You know, it's an amazing thing. One of my first centers I had in San Diego, I worked on a guy with AIDS, which wasn't popular at that time, you know, because you can get it.
Popular now.
You know, if somebody sneezes on you in those days, you got AIDS. So I worked on this guy, and he got off the table, and he was raring to go, and he was in fine shape. Took 2 people to put him on the table. So the next morning, there was 75 guys at my door.
I'll bet.
And I had 1 chair in my center. It was really decked out, right? So I said, pull up a piece of floor. And what happened was that they were all laid out all over the place. My one client comes in, who happened to be a lawyer. And he's stepping over these guys and girls, gets in the chair, and he goes, "What's wrong with all them people, Gene?" You know,
Right.
"What do you mean? What?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What do they have?" I said, "They have AIDS." Well, he cleared that chair,
Right.
and out the door he went.
And it's not that easy because the lawyer's a snake, so you
yeah,
had to go
he's right around.
He had to go snivel
Liver
it along
and
the
throat.
ground. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was tricky. Trickier than he thought.
So I figured, here I go. They're going to shut me down tomorrow, you know. So the phone rings about the end of the day, and who is it but this lawyer? He says, "I want to see you tomorrow." you know, and I says, oh boy. I could see him with the subpoena in his hand.
Right.
I says,
and the
well,
constable, like in the old movies.
Yeah, right.
Like, not even the sheriff,
Right.
the constable coming with that round hat.
And he says, and I said to him, well, hey, these guys are going to be here tomorrow. I don't care. I want to see you tomorrow. So I figured he's really got it
Right.
ready for me.
Right.
So that day he come in, stepping over everybody again. He goes into the room, sits in a chair. He says, I want to tell you what happened to me when I left here. And I figured he's going to say he broke out with AIDS, you know, something like that. He says, I went to this cancer clinic. He had cancer, where I go every week. And I have lunch with this woman who we're great friends. That's about all it is. And he says, I was telling her what you did to me. And she put her head down. She says, well, I guess we're not going to have lunch anymore.
'Cause she had AIDS. Also.
She had AIDS.
Wow.
How fast it comes around.
Really?
So he says, don't worry. He says, I'll help you out with these guys.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
And do some particular diseases take longer, or that's also hard
who
to
knows?
say? Who knows?
You know, I don't look at it as a disease. I look at it as a tag that was pinned on them. I have one rule in both my centers. One rule and one rule only is that anybody who had a death sentence given to them, where they were told they were going to die in 45 minutes, 2 years, or whatever, at the anniversary of that time that they were told, they send a get well card to the doctor. That's my one rule.
Wow. It's
So,
a beautiful rule.
Yeah. So it's hard to say who would be healed, who wouldn't be healed.
And the thing is, I mean, you can't take credit and you can't take blame.
No,
Some work and
no.
some don't, because
Yeah.
it's just
I jokingly say within 50-mile radius I take credit for.
Right. Well, that's probably fairly decent size. That'll take us from Encinitas.
Yeah.
So, I mean, are you called upon to, like, I mean, how would you come to go to Germany? Would somebody call up and say, we're arranging? I mean, because you do travel the world.
Yeah, I have people all over the world that arrange things for me, you know. And it's in Switzerland and Germany and Venezuela, Mexico, you know, all over the islands. They set it up for me, and Barbados, you know, it's funny, this just came into my mind. I was down there working, and I had this lady who had a tumor sticking out of her neck. And overnight, no tumor sticking out of her neck. I had a witch doctor come to me and said, you leave my people alone, I put a curse on you.
Wow.
And I says, be my guest. You
Yeah,
know?
I've already gone through
Yeah.
an exorcism.
Something new, right?
A
Yeah.
year of twice a week. You think your hex is working on me? You got
So I went to the building where I was doing the healing, and I looked down, and there's these bones and little skulls and little trinkets
Right,
all
and
over.
the pins.
Yeah, the pins and this and that. So I scoop them all into a paper bag, and I go find this cat, and I dump them on him, and I says, here, you need this more than I do to play with, you know. It
He didn't
blew him
like
away.
that at
No,
all, no.
blew him away. But anyway, here I am.
And what you would say about that is, you know, if you're in harmony, you're doing,
Nothing can hurt you.
you're not going to, right, you're
Yeah.
going to be protected.
Right, totally, yeah. Yeah, as you said, you know, there's a little girl I was working with over the phone. Her mother was holding her, and she was talking over the phone. And she's relating this to me. She said, you know, my husband came home that night, and he's listening to our daughter, and she says she ain't wheezing anymore. And the two of them just sat there all night listening to the child. The hole in the heart just sealed right up.
Wow.
So how do you know?
Yeah, how do you figure that?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
It's an amazing experiment here.
Yeah, there's thousands and thousands of stories. It's this one fella.
And now, I mean, your life, you just feel like that's what you,
I
your
can't.
destiny or your path or your harmony is to do as much of that, spreading that love in that way as you can.
As I can, yeah. Yeah, it's the, you know, the joke is in my centers, if there's nobody comes in the door, I grab them off the
You
sidewalk.
go to, hey, buddy, come here.
Okay, so in other words, if you were to look at the crew or look at the audience here, I mean, would you see that, like, the kidney is not fun? I mean, you know, certain healers do see it in different ways. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, would you see different colors? Would you
No,
see?
it's a knowing.
It would
goes back
knowing.
to the knowing. I was in a swimming pool, my sister's swimming pool, having a great time, and I look up and there's this lady standing there, and I says, "Who are you?" You know? She says, "Well, I'm the real estate lady that your sister wants an idea of what the house is worth and so forth and so on. And she told me what you do. How do I look?" And I looked at her and I knew what was going on. I says, "You look fine, but you know, when was your last physical?" You know? Because
that's a great comment.
You know?
That's a real cocktail party for the healer.
that got her thinking,
I
you know?
would say.
Because I can't speak for her.
Right.
I can't say, "Hey, you got this, you got that." A couple of days later, she calls me up and she says, "You know, I have the rarest cancer in the world."
And you knew it.
I knew it. Yeah.
That it was rare or that it was cancer?
I knew it was cancer.
You knew it was
Yeah.
cancer.
So 3 months, we got rid of it.
And okay, so you're in the pool, you look up, there's a woman there, and does the thought come in? Does the words come in?
It
Cancer?
just-
You just know it's
I
cancer.
know it. It's a knowing, you know. It's I'm like a 7-Eleven. I'm always there, you know, always open.
Always
It's
open.
always going. I
So
know.
that valve in you was open as a child, got closed down.
Right.
Once
Reopened.
it got traumatized enough, it got reopened, stays open,
Right.
and that's the knowing it has.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an amazing,
Yeah.
another spoke on the wheel of the amazement of it all, you know, the incredible experiment that's on this earth.
Well, that's basically what we are. We're just another experience. Because things don't happen to you or me for good, bad, or indifferent. This is another experience. What I call it is, this is our highway of life.
Right.
Guess what? No overpasses.
Yeah,
There
we're
are
on it. Right,
intersections.
we're on it.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have to take them as they come. In Germany, I call them, it's their Autobahn, right?
So, I mean, do you find like in a lot of spiritual paths and a lot of healers, like it's a matter of being in the moment? So when you're doing these healings or when you're going around, I mean, your focus and your concentration is just right there.
Totally.
So if you're thinking of like, well, I got to be in Germany in 3 weeks, it's not there.
No, it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah, I don't need a phone booth to say Shazam in, you know?
Uh-huh.
It's always on.
Uh-huh.
And it's always working. You know, I woke up in the middle of the night and Elaine had my hand on her shoulder. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I can't get you during the day, so I got to get you while you're sleeping," you know? So,
That's great.
yeah.
All right, well, you know, these shows go really fast. Actually, at the break, we were talking, you know, next season, maybe Gene will come back and do some healings on the set, and, you know, what an opportunity that would be for all of us. So again, you know, if you want any information, call me, Alan, 805-687-2053. You can check the website, heaventoearth.com. There'll be a link to Gene's website. He has his own website, a beautiful website. And, you know, the show is for you and for us. And that's the opportunity that we all have. So thanks for coming. We love you. God bless you. Good night. Bye-bye now.